What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Is Jordan Montgomery all of a sudden becoming a bargain? And is Joc Pederson's market starting to heat up?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? Always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist and graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. I'm there to see my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, we got a whole bunch of free agency news to discuss. Is Jordan Montgomery starting to become a bargain? Joc Pederson's market starting to heat up? And are the D-backs going to trade some of their depth over the next couple of weeks? So a whole bunch I want to talk to you guys about today. But first I want to say thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners. Sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. One of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now let's get into the podcast and let's discuss Jordan Montgomery and if he's starting to become a bargain all of a sudden in Major League Baseball, because of course we know Jordan Montgomery is coming off a terrible season with Arizona, and he's slated to make $22.5 million entering 2025. And coming off the season he just had, that feels very pricey for Jordan Montgomery, right? We thought it was bad when we were giving Madison Bumgarner $15 million annually to do what he did with Arizona, but Jordan Montgomery did his best Mad Bum impression this past season. 6.23 ERA, a 1.65 whip. Like, he was horrendous. We all know that. We don't got to get into the numbers too much. Like, we know Jordan Montgomery was really, really bad this year. And the $22.5 million, that was kind of guaranteed, right? He had an option depending on how many starts he made this year. He picked it up, and now he gets to come back at that price tag. And so it feels like Jordan Montgomery coming off the season he had, that price tag is way too expensive for him. But if you get the Jordan Montgomery that you've seen prior to 24, like the guy who beat the D-backs in the 2023 World Series, like the guy that teams have wanted to trade for at the deadline in 23 and 2022, like Jordan Montgomery has been a frontline starter for the 3 seasons prior to 24. And so if you get that guy back, yes, that guy is worth the price tag that he's getting paid next season. The question is, can he bounce back to that level of player? Was the 2024 season just a fluke based off different variables of him missing the entire offseason, not really doing a workout program and coming to camp out of shape? If he fixes those things going to 2025, can Jordan Montgomery bounce back? Because we know he's been a very good pitcher in Major League Baseball. And if you're getting that guy once again, then I don't think teams would have a problem trading for Jordan Montgomery at all. And I think what we're seeing right now in Major League Baseball, when looking at this free agency market, there's a bit of inflation right now with some of these starting pitchers and the salaries that they're getting, to the point where Jordan Montgomery and his $22.5 million salary might actually be a bargain for a team if they would rather take the bounce back potential on Montgomery instead of giving someone else who might not be as good a similar deal. Or maybe the deal is like lesser, but they're still not as good. But you know, Jordan Montgomery, if he hits, he's just going to be way better than that pitcher. So I wonder if there are going to be more teams who are willing to take the risk on a guy who's been really good, coming off a terrible season, who is a little expensive, as opposed to someone who you know is not as good at their best, but is just cheaper for the moment. Because right now you're seeing guys get signed out there who are getting less than $22.5 million than a Jordan Montgomery, but I don't think are as talented. And because of it, if both of these players who are free agents who just got signed hit their ceiling versus Jordan Montgomery, I think the Jordan Montgomery ceiling is way higher because a guy like Yusei Kikuchi, who, yes, had a very good second half with the Astros last year, 10 starts, a 2.7 ERA. His second half was so good, he finished ninth in Cy Young voting. But Kikuchi, the contract that the Angels just gave him, 3 years, 63. I still feel like it's pretty expensive for a guy who is a career 4.57 ERA, only one season, sub 4. I like Kikuchi. I think he's good. Good strikeout numbers, solid command. I think Kikuchi is a very solid pitcher for around 15, 16 annually. 21 million a year for Kikuchi feels expensive. And if you're telling teams that's how much he's going for, why wouldn't I want Jordan Montgomery, a frontline World Series winner for only $22 million? I think when you're comparing it like that in a vacuum, Jordan Montgomery all of a sudden starts to look more like a bargain. Another guy who just recently signed 2 years, $34 million, Frankie Montes by the New York Mets. Such a New York Mets move. He fits right along the lines of the Sean Manaea because both of those guys are in the Oakland A's rotation, right? We think of the Sean Manaeas, the Luis Severinos, and like all these tight pitchers. I think Frankie Montes fits right in with the kind of guys that the New York Mets are targeting right now. And Montes is someone that I think has been slightly overrated. Like I said on a podcast like last week, like he was really good in 2019, where he had a fantastic season with Oakland, and he was even good in 2021, 32 starts, a 3.37 ERA. But since then, the last 3 years, I think he's been kind of up and down. I think he's been more mediocre than like really good, Frankie Montes. And because of that, I'm just not that into him really. I think part of it is because he got traded to the New York Yankees in 2022 and was terrible in like a good situation. Missed all 2023, mostly because of injury. And then this past year with the Cincinnati Reds and the Milwaukee Brewers, again, he got big strikeout totals, but game to game wasn't that effective. And the fact that he's making $17 million despite not being like a great pitcher in like 3 years, like I would rather get Jordan Montgomery at $22 million a year removed from being a frontline starter than go pay Frankie Montes $17 million. Matt Boyd, he's getting $14.5 million from the Cleveland Guardians. We know Kikuchi, Montes, and Boyd. All three of those. Give me the best case scenario, their absolute peak, best season possible. None of it is better than the best season, I believe, that a Jordan Montgomery can pull together. And so if you're a team out there and it's like, yeah, I could go get Boyd or Kikuchi or Montes for like 17 to 20, or I could get a guy who is just a year removed from being arguably the best starter in a rotation that won the World Series, Jordan Montgomery is starting to become a bargain around Major League Baseball. Now I want to discuss if Joc Pederson market is starting to heat up this free agency in segment number 2. But hey, if you're thinking about buying tickets to an upcoming D-backs game, then the best place to do that, of course, is going to be Game Time, because Game Time is the best place for tickets on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Game Time has this feature called All-In Pricing. When you toggle that feature on, it shows you your total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Okay, you can even get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy. Game Time even has the lowest price guarantee, or they will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. And let's discuss, is Joc Pederson's market starting to heat up? Because there was a report, which was very obvious, but it was on MLB Trade Rumors that said the D-backs are interested in bringing back Joc Pederson. And of course, they are. Why wouldn't the D-backs be interested in bringing back Joc Pederson, of course, right? The only question is, how much is Joc Pederson going to cost? How many years does he want? And even if he wants, a 2-year, $36 million deal, like that should be fine. From all the projected contracts I've seen and salaries, it looks like Joc Pederson's going to get like no more than a 2, maybe a 3-year deal, but it feels like a 2-year deal and like the 20 million, like 18 to 20 annually range. Like I think that's probably coming down the pipe for Joc Pederson, a DH. Like those guys are usually mercenaries. And so a 2-year, like could he get the Frankie Montes, like 2 years, 34, 2 years, like 38? Like I could definitely see that for Joc Pederson, a guy who just going primarily BDH, crush right-handed pitching, and just be a massive power bat, clutch hitter, great locker room guy as well. I think so many teams are going to be interested in a Joc Pederson, not just the D-backs, of course. And right now, according to Ken Rosenthal, there are 2 teams that are, have been sniffing around the Joc Pederson market, not just the D-backs, who he wanted to reiterate are interested in bringing back Joc Pederson, which is a surprise to no one. But 2 teams that the D-backs might have to watch out for this free agency is the Tampa Bay Rays and the Texas Rangers. Now, are you guys worried about either of those 2 teams stealing Joc Pederson away from the D-backs? Because for me, I would only be worried about one of those teams. When I look at the Tampa Bay Rays, they just do not feel like a team in position to steal the services of a Joc Pederson right now away from like other franchises, because Joc Pederson feels like one of those guys who, like I mentioned, is a mercenary who is only going to get signed by teams who are contenders right now, who are a DH, a bat away from contending, right? The D-backs felt like they were a massive DH bat away from really going to the next level, already coming off a World Series. Like it was easy to sell that to Joc Pederson. Come join this up and coming team who just made to the World Series, but we need a little power in that DH spot. You've been in the NL West before, playing for the Giants, playing for the Dodgers. You're familiar with these teams, familiar with these ballparks and cities, like perfect place for you to play. It was a easy sell to Joc Pederson. But if you're Tampa Bay, like, what's the sell to Joc Pederson? We're an up and coming team who typically doesn't spend money, but we do know how to scout and pick the right players. Fans don't really like to come to our games. Our home ballpark situation is kind of up in the air next year and going forward. Like, I just don't think the sell is there right now for Tampa Bay. They're always a strong franchise. Like the best sell that they have to Joc Pederson is probably like franchise stability in terms of year after year. This is a team in the postseason or like always sniffing around, always competitive, never has too many down years where they just flame out or like non-competitive at all. Like the Rays missing the postseason in 2024 was the first time that they missed it since 2018. If you look at all their like standings, like how many times that they finished below 500 or like more than like 2 games below 500, like not that many. This is usually a team that's winning at least 80 games every year. Like the last time that they've won below 80 games, like they've only done it twice since like 2008. The last time that they lost the World Series, they've only won less than 80 games, fewer than 80 games twice since then. So this is a team, we talk about franchise stability, they're always sniffing around in terms of winning games. This is a team that's great at doing that. But I've always, discussed the Tampa Bay Rays as a regular season team because they always feel flawed. It always feels like there's something holding them back. Typically, maybe they don't have enough stars in their offense. Maybe they do have really good pitchers, but no one that you consider like frontline starters. A Joc Pederson can come in and help you a lot. And like we saw this past season with the D-backs, put up superstar numbers out of that DH position. But Joc Pederson is a guy that should be like the cherry on top. He's the guy that gets you over the edge, gets you to the finish line. Right now, I don't think the Tampa Bay Rays are in a position where they can say they're a Joc Pederson bat away from really competing on the next level, really competing for a World Series next year. Yes, Joc Pederson might get them in playoff contention, but I think Joc Pederson is a mercenary who should only be signed by teams that are ready to win it all. That's why I would be more scared of the Texas Rangers stealing Joc Pederson away from Arizona because Texas has a lineup that on paper just looks absolutely nasty if you drop Joc Pederson in the middle. Because think about this. Marcus Semien at second, Corey Seager at shortstop. So got Wyatt Langford in the outfield, Ardolis Garcia in the outfield, Nate Lowe at first base, Josh Young at third base, Jonah Heim at catcher, another Evan Carter in the outfield, and then at DH, Joc Pederson. Like, that is a nasty and maybe the best 1 through 9 lineup in Major League Baseball. If the Texas Rangers were able to add Joc Pederson, they had such a down year offensively this past year. You look up and down the lineup, and outside of Corey Seager, no one produced, no one hit for the Rangers this past year. Marcus Semien was terrible. Adolis Garcia was also terrible. Josh Young missed a lot of time due to injury. Wyatt Langford, he heated up at the end, but slow start. Evan Carter never really got going like we wanted him to. Like, they just had so many disappointments from their lineup in such a weird way where right in 2023, the year that they won the World Series, they had arguably the best and the deepest lineup in Major League Baseball. The Semien Corey Seager combination was nasty with a Garcia, with a Nathan Lowe. Basically, everyone I just named just now was an all-star to a superstar to an MVP level player in 2023. And then it seemed like everyone regressed the other way. Like, everyone had the best version that they can in a single season in 2023 and then had like the worst version of themselves in 2024. That's just how baseball goes sometimes. Sometimes you're elite, sometimes it goes very quickly. But if I'm looking at the Texas Rangers and you want to bounce back, you're coming off a disappointing season where you had the World Series hangover. The offense was never able to get going. Joc Pederson is a guy who has been on the West Coast most of his life, playing in the National League, but he can still stay on the West Coast, playing in the AL West with the Texas Rangers. And I think in that lineup, in that ballpark, I think he would help out so many guys in that lineup get back on track, because Joc Pederson, from a play discipline, from a fear standpoint, like, he is so good and he sets the tone, and his vibe, his energy, his play discipline, his approach to the game is just going to be contagious and trickle down the rest of the lineup. So when looking at the reported teams who are interested in Joc Pederson, I am not worried about the Tampa Bay Rays. I do not think they are in a good current position to take Joc Pederson. Joc Pederson is a mercenary who should be the cherry on top to a team who are just a piece, a bat away from winning the World Series. The Rangers won in 2023, had a very disappointing year in 2024, but you bring back Joc Pederson in 2025, and hey, they might be back on track. Now, I want to discuss if the D-backs might be trading some of their depth, coming up here very shortly in segment number 3. All right. Now, I want to talk to you guys about this little app I use whenever I want to place a wager called FanDuel, because get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, and let's discuss the D-backs and their depth, because we know the D-backs depth was so important to what they did this past season. The biggest reason why the D-backs missed the postseason is because the pitching was really bad. And then number 2, the pitching was really bad because a lot of the pitchers were hurt and were never able to get into a rhythm, right? But the only reason why the D-backs were even in position the final day of the regular season to potentially make the postseason is because the depth of this D-backs team stepped up in such a way with the rotation and the lineup and so many guys in and out. This depth was really important. And I still like this D-backs lineup, even with Joc and Grichuk and Joc and Christian Walker potentially gone. D-backs still have pretty decent depth on this roster currently. And right now, Mike Hazen is getting a few calls about the depth on this roster because the D-backs still have a good amount of outfielders with Gurriel, Carroll, Jake McCarthy, and then you still got Alec Thomas, still got Jorge Barrosa. Like there's still some outfielders that the D-backs can move if they really wanted to. And then you look at the rotation and we talk about Monty. Maybe you want to move at Erod. I don't know how teams feel about Ryan Nelson. Like there's a bunch of depth that this D-backs team have. And if you even look deeper past that rotation to some of the more deeper pitchers like the Gilbert Diaz, the Blake Walston. There's all of a sudden a whole bunch of guys that the D-backs could potentially trade. Slade Ciccone, Christian Mena, Tommy Henry, even a guy like Dre Jameson can be thrown out there in the mix. And that's why we did a podcast yesterday, I believe, detailing that we need to watch Mike Hazen and the D-backs front office over the next couple weeks, because when looking at the history of the D-backs transactions prior to the winter meetings during the Mike Hazen tenure, you would say 2/3 of the time Mike Hazen has made a splash move prior to the winter meetings, whether that's his first year with Arizona, trading for the current franchise star Ketel Marte, whether it was another season trading away franchise star Paul Goldschmidt. He signed Merrill Kelly before the deadline, Mark Melancon before the deadline. Just this past year, 2023, you know what he did before winter meetings? Not the deadline. Before winter meetings, Eugenio Suarez. Mike Hazen is someone that does not just sit on his hands. He's not saying, oh, I got to wait for that 3-day weekend in early December where GMs just talk and do nothing for me to make a move. No, Mike Hazen's not about that. He's going to make a move during winter meetings, no doubt, because Mike Hazen is an aggressive guy. But even before we get there, it's December 2nd now. Winter meetings start December 9th. Watch Mike Hazen. Watch to see what he does, because between now and then, Mike Hazen is going to be on the phone a lot, and he's going to be potentially wheeling and dealing. You look at this D-backs outfield, teams are interested. Corbin Carroll, he is not going anywhere, but we're seeing our own D-backs fans, right, throw out fake Jake McCarthy trades because he's just a guy who is just so easy to move for another piece that the D-backs might need, especially, there's been that fake trade proposal where it's like Jake McCarthy essentially for Yandy Diaz. Like if you're somehow able to work out like that kind of a deal, like, yeah, I probably would do something like that. If it's Jake and Slade for Pete Fairbrinks and a Yandy Diaz, like, yeah, that's a great trade. I probably would do that. There are a bunch of trades I probably would do Jake McCarthy for if it helps out the D-backs, if it's a different area of need. Not every trade, because I love Jake McCarthy, and if it's not a clear win where I feel good about the player coming back, I do not want to do the deal. I like Yandy. I like Peter Fairbrinks. That's why I would not be afraid to do that deal. But if you're telling me it's like, I'm trying to think of like a random first baseman in Major League Baseball that I don't like. But if you're telling me we're trading Jake McCarthy for like, I don't know, Joey Gallo to play first base, just like a random hypothetical, like, yeah, I would be upset. I don't want the D-backs to do that. And so we could see someone like that get moved. Gurriel, I wouldn't expect to get moved, but you never know. I expect more like an Alec Thomas or Jorge Barrosa. Like last year, we saw Dominic Fletcher get moved, and I think we all like that move for Christian Mena, who definitely has upside as a pitcher. Like if Mike Hazen can find another move like that, we're trading Alec Thomas, who to someone as an easy sell. He's immediately going to go out there and start every game in center field for you and be the best defensive outfielder on your roster. Like that's an easy sell to other teams, and maybe you could get back a low ranking minor league arm or something like that. Another low ranking minor league pitching prospect who maybe he's young, maybe he's a little erratic, but maybe he can throw hard. Maybe he's a little bit of a specialist. I would do something like that if you could trade Alec Thomas. Looking at the D-backs rotation, we already know a guy like Jordan Montgomery is available. And as we discussed earlier on the podcast, as free agency moves and you see guys like Blake Snell get nearly $40 million, you see guys like Kikuchi get 20, Frankie get 17, like Jordan Montgomery, just a year removed from being the dude in a World Series rotation. Why not take the gamble on that man for only $22 million? I would not be surprised at all. D-backs still have other arms in their rotation as well in terms of those fringe pieces and the Blakes and the Yilbers and the Dreys and the Tommies. Like, those guys could get moved at any time. At least guys like Tommy at times have shown you, like, you know what? Maybe he can be a swingman, long reliever, a number 5 starter, hold it down type for a little bit, just like a little baby Nick Martinez. Nowhere near as good, but just kind of in that mold. Like, could someone be interested in trading for a guy like that? Maybe, maybe not. But the D-backs have themselves a ton of depth, and with just a few more days until the winter meetings, I would have my eyes on Mike Hazen to see if he's going to make himself a splash play. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news, coverage, and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Dose.